This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day as the United States moves just a little bit closer to actually signing, and maybe signing first and then publicizing the contents of the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, that is supposed to bring a successful end to the war against Iran. Will it fulfill that goal and bring a successful end to the war? It could well bring an end to the war, and certainly everybody hopes so. But successful, that's another story, where people on every side of the political equation, including people who have been very loyal followers and fans of President Donald Trump, are questioning the wisdom of this particular agreement and its details. We'll be speaking later today to Andrew McCarthy, who wrote a blistering article in National Review talking about the agreement, or the proposed agreement, of the agreement that's supposed to be signed in Switzerland on Friday. Okay, maybe better, it should be signed in Switzerland, which is officially a neutral country on everything, than to be signed in Pakistan, which is a troubled country of its own, and one that hasn't yet made peace with Afghanistan, where there's fighting back and forth. But okay, they're going to be in Switzerland. They're going to sign an agreement. What will it mean? We'll be talking about that with Andrew McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and senior editor at National Review. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Iran to end the war includes provisions allowing Iran to immediately sell oil. Sources told the paper that the U.S. will extend waivers to Iran for sanctions on its oil sales and lift sanctions on banking, insurance, and transportation required for Iran to sell and export oil. A draft of the MOU published Tuesday by Bloomberg. We shared part of that draft with you on this program. But that draft of the agreement of the Memorandum of Understanding also included language about the creation of a $300 billion reconstruction plan for Iran. Now, where does that money come from? Who knows? We are assured by Vice President Vance and others that there won't be a penny of taxpayer money in that. No one believes that. It's not possible. They can't put $300 billion into Iranian reconstruction just by magic, by wishing for it to be there. And part of the money would come from the lifting of all U.S. sanctions on the country and the release of all Iranian frozen assets following the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, so long as Iran reiterated its commitment to never build a nuclear weapon. The question is, does anyone believe that commitment from before this war started? In other words, if they were willing to violate their proclaimed membership on the International Association of Nations that are opposed to nuclear proliferation, if they couldn't be believed on that, why would they be believed on this? Why would this be a reliable indication of the way a responsible nation handles things? Does anyone believe that the regime in Tehran has gotten better, more favorable to the West, more reasonable, no longer willing to try to hold mass demonstrations regularly where they chant death to America, death to America, death to America, and oh yes, death to Israel too. The idea that somehow the experience of this war has changed something profoundly in Tehran, that appears to be a fantasy, a daydream. Meanwhile, the Israeli ambassador to the U.S., whose name is Yechiel Leiter, said that Iranian claims that the deal included a ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon were incorrect and baseless, and that Israel would not withdraw its forces unilaterally from Lebanon with no pledge at all for Hezbollah to stop their missile attacks, which have been very regular and very punishing on northern Israel. The opening language of the MOU published by Bloomberg states that by signing it, both sides agreed to an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon. But Israel isn't signing this agreement. They have never said that they would. They have never actually been asked to sign it. And Israel's ambassador in Israel, the U.S. ambassador in Israel, Mike Huckabee, has been very strong in echoing the sentiments of most Israelis that the idea of a unilateral pledge to disarm, to retreat, to hand a victory to Hezbollah. Hezbollah killed Americans before they started killing Israelis, and they have been killing Americans regularly since the 1980s. So the request in this memorandum of understanding for the United States to punish, push, compel our ally Israel to basically remain unengaged in responding to whatever Hezbollah throws against them, that is unreasonable, impossible, and ill-advised. Mike Pence has been particularly strong and outspoken on the issue of this memorandum, and he was on CNN torching Trump's ill-advised peace deal with Iran, so-called. We will get to that coming up, and to the contrasting view of not our former Vice President, Mike Pence, who has been very outspoken and very constructive, it seems to me, since the publication of his book, which is his version of a conscientious conservatism, and that emphasizes the differences between conservatism and populism. We'll also be bringing you up to date on the latest of the summit meeting that has been going on with the G7 nations, a summit meeting that reaffirmed support for Ukraine. Is it possible that the president, while he claims that everything has been solved, that everything is solid in the war on Iran, that he is somehow now taking some attention away from dealing with Tehran and dealing with Iran to giving that attention where it is much needed in support for Ukraine? We will get to that and to more about the big, beautiful ballroom that may be going bust, and more on the Michael Medved Show coming up.
Paze Checkout is offered by your banks and credit unions. So when you shop online at participating merchants, your cards appear in one place, ready to use and kept up to date. And the best part, your actual card number isn't shared when you check out, because boundaries are healthy, like no work emails after 6. One small step for boundaries, one big leap for checkout. Paze. It checks out. Activation required. See Paze.com to learn more. Terms and conditions apply.
And on the Michael Medved Show, Mike Pence, the former vice president of the United States, former congressman, a very powerful and respected member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and, of course, governor of Indiana. With all of that and his popularity and effectiveness as vice president for 4 years under President Trump, has now torched, is the word they use on CNN, Trump's ill-advised peace deal with Iran, saying it is much bigger than a mistake. Listen to the former vice president, clip 20.
Much bigger than a mistake. I mean, when the president took that historic step to strike those nuclear facilities last year, this is the first time in 47 years that an American president had taken the fight directly to the mullahs in Tehran. And America was safer as a result. And the fact that he tried diplomacy for the following year to begin to make progress and then finally recognized that we just got to take the fight to them, launched Operation Epic Fury. Our military responded brilliantly. But in this moment, the posture that we're getting from the Iranians, my concern is what appears to be leaking out. These immediate concessions, particularly sanctions waivers right out of the gate that would essentially be a lifeline to the Iranian regime, I think is ill-advised. We ought to keep the pressure on, keep the blockade on, and if need be, let our armed forces get back to work.
That is a very direct contribution by Mike Pence. And continuing on CNN, he talked about that figures of $3 billion a month in sanction relief and one payment of $300 billion. That's not $300 million, $300 billion of money going to sustain this regime of extremism and terrorist support. This again, Mike Pence on CNN, clip 19.
The language that has come out, there's no mention of dismantling the nuclear program or the ballistic missile program. There's no commitment to ending support for Hamas, Hezbollah, or other terrorist organizations. But in contrast to that, there is immediate sanctions relief from the moment the MOU is signed. That could be upwards to $3 billion a month into the coffers of the Iranian regime. There's a pledge of $100 billion in Iranian frozen assets being freed up. At least some of the language that's leaked that would be released even before a final deal is struck in the event of progress. And then finally calling for the United States and others to arrange for a $300 billion reconstruction fund when the IRGC and radical Islamists continue to be at the helm in Iran is deeply
ill-advised. And then Mike Pence also spoke about what he would do differently if he were still the vice president, and what he would say to President Trump, assuming the old team from the first term had come back to power together. Here is what Pence would tell the president under these current circumstances. This is clip 17.
Look, when I was vice president, I had one answer with one notable occasion when the president asked me to step into a role, and I said, I'm here to serve. And I respect the vice president's role here, but I know who's making the deal. Nothing's changed in this new Trump administration from the last one, as far as I can see. I mean, the president is the one that's green-lighting this tactic and this strategy. And if I was still at his side, I would urge him to go back to his first instincts when it comes to Iran, and that is peace through strength. I don't know how we're going to have greater leverage over what remains of that terrorist regime in Iran after we go into another 60 days or more of a ceasefire and negotiations. Now is the moment to stand firm, and quite frankly, if Iran is not convinced that they are defeated and need to come to the table and yield on those points, then we ought to allow the armed forces of the United States and our ally Israel to convince them.
Okay, it's not to just allow them to convince them. It's to order them to convince them, because our military doesn't serve based on its own inclinations. It serves at the discretion and under the direction of the commander-in-chief. The question here is, okay, so J.D. Vance, as vice president, is required to support the policies and postures of his boss. But other than J.D. Vance, who else is supporting this deal? Where else do you hear, other than members of the administration, and yes, the vice president, current vice president, is a member of the administration, where else do you hear words of celebration or encouragement or backing for this president's position? J.D. Vance was on Sirius XM with Megyn Kelly and suggesting why it is he thinks that we have not formally released the final text to which the nation is going to be formally committed on Friday. This is Vice President Vance on Sirius XM, clip 18.
Why can't we all see the MOU right now?
Well, yeah. So first of all, the president said by the latest Friday, possibly as early as tomorrow, we're going to release the memorandum of understanding text. The reason why we haven't released it yet is there are some delicate diplomatic things going on where the Iranians, and not just the Iranians, but some of our mediators, the Pakistanis and the Qataris, have asked us to sequence this in the right way. I don't frankly fully understand it, but there are sensitivities that exist in the Arab and Muslim world that we're trying to be responsive to. Fundamentally, does it really matter if the deal comes out on Wednesday versus Friday?
Well, it matters because one of the things that President Trump has said is he would like to get congressional approval of this commitment, which would be a positive thing generally. But how can you get a commitment unless it's discussed openly in its final form? And when it doesn't have anything specific, but it has indications that one of the things that we're committed to doing is pushing Israel to disarm and to subject itself to continued daily attacks by missiles, drones, and other means from the vicious terrorists at Hezbollah. And, oh, by the way, one of the points Andrew McCarthy makes, for 30 years, Hezbollah has been officially, by the U.S., designated as a terror organization. We'll get back to the one voice out there, it's a conservative voice, that says the Iran deal is a good return by Donald Trump to realism.
The Michael Medved Show.
Listen.
Nationwide.
Listen.
And around the world at michaelmedved.com.
And listen.
Need a laptop that's built to perform and designed to last all day? Select Windows 11 PCs starting at $499.99 are now at Best Buy. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
And on the Michael Medved Show, I mentioned that there is one very prominent conservative voice that is speaking up in support of the Iran deal, the deal that is going to be signed formally in Switzerland coming up on Friday. And that prominent voice belongs to Gerard Baker, who is the editor-at-large at Wall Street Journal, who has a column headlined "With an Iran Deal, Trump returns to realism. And it's an interesting position because Baker was one of those voices who has never been a supporter of this war. So maybe it makes sense that he is backing the deal because if nothing else, at least it stops the ongoing danger to American life and treasure and the economy that has been incurred through the conduct of Operation Epic Fury. Baker writes, the argument against this war was never that it was unjustified. The Iranian regime has American blood on its hands. We would be safer and the world a much better place if that regime were gone or at least disarmed. The case against the war concerned whether this war was prudent, whether we could achieve our aims with the resources we were prepared to commit. After a month of bombing that damaged but didn't destroy Iran's missile capabilities, that failed to eliminate the nuclear materials, and that handed the regime control of one of the world's most important shipping lanes, it became clear we could not achieve these goals at an acceptable price. The depletion of munitions, economic damage, and escalating harm to American prestige and strategic interests made the effort, and still more so, further escalation, not worth it. So, writes Gerard Baker, after another unhappy flirtation with the failed idea that America can remake the world with just the right amount of will, there's a good chance Mr. Trump will revert to the foreign policy doctrine that served him well before February 28th. And that foreign policy doctrine is basically America first. This uber-realist approach, is what he calls it, to international relations has been rejected by foreign policy experts for both practical and moral reasons. But you can make the case that Mr. Trump had a clearer understanding of modern geopolitics than the experts and nudged America in the right direction in recent years. The case for an approach tilted more toward the raw pursuit of American interests on the basis of raw American power is compelling, but that power needs to be exerted judiciously. That is more or less what Mr. Trump did before the folly of Epic Fury in his first term, with targeted military operations against Qasem Soleimani, who was killed, and ISIS terrorists, and economic confrontation with China. In his second term, with the destruction of Iranian nuclear facilities last year and the capture of Nicolas Maduro in January. But realism must embrace reality. The president has discovered that in both the economic and the military fields, there are limits to what the U.S. can achieve with its power. Last year, he backed off an all-out economic war with China when Beijing demonstrated it had economic power of its own. What a shock. Iran has now demonstrated there are limits to what we can achieve militarily at a reasonable cost. And then he includes this way. Gerard Baker in the Wall Street Journal writes, but this realism may also require us to do things Mr. Trump hasn't been so good at, such as working with allies, even feckless allies, or listening to the advice of a friend like Volodymyr Zelensky, with whom we might have inflicted greater damage on a strategic rival rather than one like Benjamin Netanyahu in a project that ended up doing us more harm than good. the approach President Trump is taking isn't very idealistic. It doesn't appeal to the American instinct for moral as well as material superiority. But the naked pursuit of our national interest is a surer route, he writes, to the survival of our values than the fruitless chasing of unrealistic aspirations. Is that fruitless chasing of unrealistic aspirations illustrated by the current position of J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance was on Fox with Greg Gutfeld and indicated what bothered him about the current situation, about our international position. This is clip 16.
I said on the 5, I wasn't surprised because we're inundated with messages about how kind of almost irrelevant patriotism. And what's your take on this?
So I think this is a very, very bad thing. And to make a bipartisan point here, the Republican VP trying to be bipartisan, I was raised by patriotic Union Democrats who maybe wouldn't have agreed with every single policy of a Republican administration, but they recognize that this is the greatest country in the world and every single one of us should be grateful to live here. And I think that is the fundamental problem. Greg, it doesn't bother me when congressional Democrats disagree with our policies. It bothers me like that they're just terrible people, so many of them. Mm-hmm. But what really does bother me is that they don't show gratitude for the United States of America. Disagree with our policies, but if you don't feel grateful to live here and for the people who made it possible, then what are you even doing being in public service? Yeah. Too many Democrats don't show appreciation for the country.
Okay, that indictment of Democrats, a strong shot and a strong argument. And gratitude is such an important feature of any kind of human happiness, because if you believe that the greatest pathway to unhappiness is not self-pity, it's anger. And because if you're angry, you are basically in showing hatred for the reality which you're experiencing. And gratitude is the opposite. Gratitude is the acknowledgement of the blessings, and the blessings that we have here in the United States are phenomenal. Meanwhile, Mike Pence, the current former vice president, has a very different message than J.D. Vance. And one of his messages is to deride the settlement we're going through as a historic error and giving a question about the peace deal smacking of appeasement. Coming up on the Michael Medved Show.
Suffering from dry, tired, irritated eyes? Don't let dry eyes win. Use Systane Pro. It hydrates, restores, and protects dry eyes for up to 12 hours. Systane Pro. Triple action dry eye relief.
On the Michael Medved Show, there is a piece by Bret Stephens in the New York Times. And Bret Stephens was a very enthusiastic supporter of the war at the very beginning. And he now has a headline that summarizes his reservations about the peace agreement that brings an end to the war that he supported. The headline says, Trump got spooked and Iran stood firm. And the subheading, the hard men of Tehran prevailed over the vain man of Washington. Now, is this a question of somebody who doesn't like President Trump, who did like his decision with Operation Epic Fury, but now is reverting simply to judging Trump as an individual rather than judging his policy fairly? And he is basically making the point that it is very tough to contradict, frankly. He says Iran's military leaders have greeted the ceasefire agreement with President Trump as a triumph, crowing that through the imposition of their divine and iron will. Doesn't that sound like Nazis? Divine and iron will. You remember the biggest Nazi propaganda film by Leni Riefenstahl was called Triumph des Willen, Triumph of the Will. So they believe their divine and iron will had, quote, humiliated American and Zionist enemies. And Bret Stephens says mostly they're right, mostly because it's worth remembering that the current regime in Iran is far less formidable than it was before the Hamas assault on Israel on October 7th, 2023. Back then, Iran had potent allies and proxies in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Yemen. Its nuclear program was intact and steadily accumulating ever larger quantities of highly enriched uranium. It had a powerful military industrial base, a weak but functional economy, and a government that, for all its repressiveness, was internationally recognized as legitimate. Today, most of that is either gone or diminished. Iran is no longer within sprinting distance of making a bomb. Its ally in Syria was deposed. Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis have lost much of their fighting strength. The Iranian rial is now the world's most worthless currency. The leadership rules an unhappy population that, outside of diehard loyalists, would almost certainly overthrow it if given the chance. Its latest ballistic missile salvo against Israel failed to land a single serious blow. They were all shot down. Its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is strained, but did not strangle the world's energy markets. Those are real achievements against an evil, ambitious regime, yet the outcome of war rarely rests on a tally of relative strength. War is a contest of wills, and in that contest, the hard men of Tehran appear to have scored a decisive victory over the vain man in Washington. In other words, Trump got spooked after the regime didn't instantly crumble and energy prices began to shoot up. He then effectively abandoned the war he had started after less than 6 weeks of sustained combat in which the United States lost fewer service members than, say, in the 1983 invasion of Grenada, which very few people remember. It was under Reagan, and it was not controversial particularly. He compounded the error with an almost comical succession of military threats and last-minute climb downs, each of them signaling indecision and weakness to Iranian adversaries practiced in the art of exploiting weakness. Though the details of the deal remain murky, writes Bret Stephens, a telling indicator of its likely shoddiness, since the administration would surely trumpet the terms of a strong agreement. It's already clear that Trump has betrayed his promise to the Iranian people of, after they were massacred in January, to quell anti-government protests, that help is on the way. As in Venezuela, to say nothing of China and Russia, this administration's message to oppressed people everywhere is that their rights come last. This idea is extraordinary when you think about and important. It's significant in terms of what is our message to oppressed people around the world, of whom there are plenty. This is also breaking news from CNN, and very relevant to one of the points that Bret Stephens was making. The United States today released the official text of the Memorandum of Understanding reached over the weekend with Iran. That text follows almost word for word and very closely the text provided by Bloomberg that we were using yesterday to give you first word about what was going on here with this settlement. And in terms of reactions to the settlement, do we still have that commentary about the inebriated homeschooler by Senator Kennedy? Okay, how much time do I have?
Confident that Iran is going to give up its nuclear ambitions, or do you have any sort of skepticism?
Well, what? If you, how can I put this? Unless you were homeschooled by a day drinker, no one's confident that Iran's going to do anything, and it's unfair to hold anyone to that standard.
Until you were homeschooled by a day drinker? Okay, that is not the case here, and that is not the case for Mike Pence. He said this about the current agreement that is now being released, even as we speak. This is clip 15.
The Iranians, particularly with regard to their nuclear ambition, have essentially a legacy of lies. They lied their way through the Obama-Iran nuclear deal. We tore that up during the Trump-Pence years. Joe Biden returned to the politics of appeasement. And at least what we're hearing echo out of this potential memorandum of understanding, it smacks of appeasement. I mean, it sounds a bit like what I write about in my book, that the progressive left has long embraced appeasement against our adversaries like Iran, but there are voices on the populist right that would have us pull back from our role as leader in the free world. I don't think this is the time to pull back. I don't think this is a moment for appeasement, and I think I would urge the president to stand firm on the fundamental elements that Iran has to dismantle and abandon its nuclear program, dismantle its ballistic missile program, renounce the support of terrorist organizations.
This goes along with the idea of invoking appeasement with Bret Stephens' reference to Neville Trump. Get it? Neville Chamberlain, the big architect of appeasement before World War II, who ended up actually helping to bring on the disasters of World War II. More coming up about what is happening with support for Ukraine, and maybe even an increase in Trump administration support for the Ukrainians, and also the results of primaries in 3 states yesterday showing a mixed record for candidates who were strongly endorsed by President Trump. That and more coming up in This Greatest Nation on God's Green Earth.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.